Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. In this episode, I get to interview Alberto Esparza from the Si Se Puede Foundation. This foundation of Si Se Puede operates in Arizona, the entire state. Join me as I learn from Alberto Esparza the struggles that he went through in starting Si Se Puede organization and how he was able to overcome them. How he managed to handwrite a grant and obtain money to continue his mission. So let's get started. Welcome to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Thank you so much for joining us on the audience. Once again, this is an episode of audio and also a video for those of you who want to watch via YouTube or listen to it in the podcast version. Today we have a wonderful individual. His name is Alberto Esparza, who is the founder of Si Se Puede. Back in 1993, he left his regular career to follow his heart and make his passion of helping other individuals a reality. He focuses statewide in Arizona with this, and he has robotics being something that he focuses on, part of the STEM. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Alberto Esparza. How are you, Mr. Alberto?
We're doing fine.
Fantastic. Can you share a little bit about your background, please, of how you got started?
Briefly, I started the organization back in 1993. I was a U.S. probation and parole officer and was not very happy at that time, even though that I was making about $85,000 a year. That was a lot of money back in 1985. So I decided to go into a new career path. I was not really sure what I wanted to do, but I embarked on this journey. I wanted to create and sustain a nonprofit organization. And for some reason, I had the audacity to believe that I would be able to create and sustain this foundation. But it was a journey. It was really a journey. I find myself being lonely all by myself on my journey. In 1994 is when I really started to incorporate or have an idea what direction that I wanted to go to. I was asked to go into the city of Scottsdale back in 1994. And at that time, the city of Scottsdale was having some problems with the Latino community and the non-Latino community. And they consulted with me to try to come in and build a bridge between both of those communities. And what I did is that I brought the English classes to the Latino community, and I brought Spanish classes to the non-Latino community. And slowly, we began to build a bridge. And it was there that I first created Si Se Puede Foundation. And again, I was a volunteer when they asked me to come out and help. So I saw this location, and to many people, it just looked like a dilapidated area, but to me, it was where Si Se Puede should be founded. And it was basically a tree. And right under the tree is when I started the ESL classes. I brought in soccer. We did a mural out there. And mind you, it's a non-Latino community, very affluent. And we were able to create a mural with Virgen de Guadalupe, the Cesar Chavez United Farm Workers Union, and a Latino holding a diploma. That was the first time that that community had ever seen that before. And it was well accepted. I was very surprised that they had accepted the mural. From there, the foundation continued to grow. I was in that community for about 4 years, and it was the greatest time of my life. Mind you, I was not paid at that time, but I was out there like a full-time employee. I got an offer to go into the Mesa School District and to work with kids who were heavily deemed at risk. That was the phrase back then, deemed at risk, but there were kids who were heavily involved in gangs. And I wanted to change. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to go into the schools because I'm a maestro by heart. And so my journey took me to Mesa, where I created school programs. And I began to work with kids who were deemed at risk. These kids were basically involved in gangs. So it took someone very special to go in there and gain their trust. So I was in the communities. I brought in dance program, youth soccer. When I brought in youth soccer, the program continued to grow. Mind you, it was just me by myself. And we had over 2,000 kids playing in a rec league that I was basically hosting and delivering. So it was Herculean at that time. I brought in dance programs. I brought in ESL classes to the community, and it just continued to grow. Mind you that there was no monies coming at the time. I was sleeping in the vacant offices. I was walking from school district to school district. And in 1990, I believe, 8, when we got our first grant at $25,000. But it wasn't easy to get that grant. And I
So
recall,
how did you manage to get that grant? I mean, that must have been an obstacle. Did you have some support, grant writers, or did you learn yourself how to do a grant writing? Now, mind you, for the audience, back in 1993, there was really no internet and there was
exactly.
really no Google. So you couldn't search and find anything. You actually, if you wanted to search any or research anything, you needed to go to the physical library and do the index Rolodex cards and figure out if you had the book or the encyclopedia and then figure that stuff out. And he had to travel by public transportation or, do all this other stuff that at that time it was normal. But if you look at it from this day and age, it's a little bit retro. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but how did you manage to do the grant writing and get it approved? Because that's a daunting task.
I just made the sign of the cross, went to the
Uh-huh.
public library,
Okay.
went on the internet, and began to discover what were goals and objectives. And
Okay.
that's how I began my grant. But mind you, it was just me by myself. A lot of times these nonprofits are founded by a community person who really doesn't have the business background. I did not have a business background. I knew nothing about a nonprofit organization, board of directors, grant writing, and that sort of thing. So I just flew by the seat of my pants.
Right.
What happens a lot is that a lot of nonprofits, they really don't support each other. And it was very difficult to come into the circle of nonprofits. But to answer your question, I hand wrote the grant.
Oh,
I hand wrote it, and it was delivered to United Way. And at that time, nonprofits, my peers could actually be in that room while you're presenting. And I'll never forget, one of the chairpersons basically was very upset that I handed in a handwritten grant. And basically, I was in tears because they just basically tore it apart. But I'll never forget, there was a director there from United Way who he and I knew each other for years, and he spoke up. And he supported us, and he made sure that we got at least $25,000. And that was the impetus that we needed to continue to create Si Se Puede Foundation. The reason why it was created, because I thought that really that I had something special that I could share with kids, that I could share with the communities. And I was basically, prior to that, I was a civil rights activist. So I was very involved in a lot of those type of the issues that affected the community. So this is something that I wanted to do, I wanted to create, and it just kept growing. It just kept growing. Kids were coming into the program. We brought in youth soccer, we brought in dance, we brought in ESL classes, and I got involved in robotics in 1998.
At the very early stages of robotics, and it's evolved from what it was then to what it is now. So let me go back a little bit to when you were still a correctional officer. I mean, you said that you were a civil rights activist. I don't know exactly from what frame to what frame, but then you became a correctional officer. And then at what point and how many years down the line did you say, you know what, this is not necessarily for me? And can you pinpoint when the idea or the seed for Si Se Puede was instilled in you, by whom or by what?
That's a good question. When I was a child, my heroes were Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, the Cesar Chavez. So even back at the elementary school, those were my heroes. And my book reports were always on those three people, always on those three people. Once I got into high school, I joined every social club that you can imagine. Once I got into community college, I got involved with Mecha. It was Mecha that taught me how to become a grassroots organizer, and I got involved in a lot of community issues, and that was the seeds that were planted in me to continue to do that.
Did you get involved in Mecha at the high school level or at the university level?
At the community college.
At the community college. And did you go to Arizona State University after that? Or yes?
I went to Arizona State University, and a lot of those folks who were involved at that club, they continue to be involved in the Mecha Club, and I got involved with them as well. A lot of my friends became lawyers, and
Oh,
they wanted
okay.
me to become an attorney, but my heart was in the community. So
Okay.
I got a degree in education, and that's what my desire was, and my interest was to become an educator.
So becoming an educator, getting a degree in education, then you went to become a correctional officer. And that's a little bit
Different.
contradictory. So how did that come about?
Well, it was an opportunity to apply for a job, and
Right.
I applied for the job, and I got it, and I really loved it at the time,
Okay.
and it gave me an opportunity to go get the master's degree from Northern Arizona University. So I pursued a master's degree, but I was pretty much happy at that time from the county level. Once I got into the feds, then I was not happy. My
Mm,
role was a pre-sentence writer, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
I
it's
am
just
not.
writing reports and writing reports, and I didn't really love it, and so I wanted something new, and so I just decided that I wanted something different. I wanted to go back into the community and do what I wanted to do, and that's work in the community. So that's how it happened.
Right.
It was just
At the point when you were saying, okay, I'm gonna make that jump, did you hesitate or did you just cut all ties with your employment, or did you do it little by little and slowly it started growing and you said, okay, I'm catching momentum. This is something that people are starting to believe in. I feel certain that if I let go of my full-time job, I can sustain myself. And mind you, I don't know if at that time you were married, had children, a family, or not.
No, I just did it, and I just walked away, and I was looking for some other avenues, and I got a call from the city of Scottsdale. They were looking for a Spanish speaker at that time to kind of build a bridge between the Latino community and the non-Latino community. I volunteered, and that's where the organization was created. And I recall in that community, there was a vacant, kind of a vacant area. There was a pool that didn't have any water, that was just open, and kids could have just fell in there. So I went into the city, and we worked on trying to fill that pool with cement. And once it was filled with cement, that became the center for Si Se Puede. I got some photos, outstanding photos about that time. So my
Fantastic.
journey is filled with photos, but that's how it was created. And I had no idea, honestly, that this was going to become a nonprofit at that time. I was
Okay.
so happy being involved in the community. They called me maestro all the time, and I was working with kids. I brought in youth soccer, dance, ESL classes. It just continued to grow from there. The reputation just grew, and then schools started calling me to work with kids who were deemed at risk, involved in gangs. I went to the city of Mesa, then I went to Gilbert, and then I went to Chandler, which really the foundation took off and really became state STEM focused at that time.
So when you moved over, that's when it became STEM focused. And this is
Yeah.
back in 2000,
This is back in 1998. I remember,
1998, when you
yeah.
started going into robotics. That's when it started shifting a little bit. So that kind of leads into my next question. The main focus initially was just to build a bridge between the Hispanic and Latino community. And that's what I understood. If I'm incorrect, of Si Se Puede,
That's
what was
correct.
the main focus and how has it changed from your point of view up to now?
How has it changed between the both
Well, from
beginnings?
the original idea
A
that you
little bit.
had in the vision up to what it is now. So from
Okay.
start to up to the current frame.
Back then, it didn't have a focus. It didn't have a
Okay.
vision. But in 1998, when I discovered First Lego League, which is the entry level to robotics,
Mm-hmm.
then I began to focus because I didn't see a lot of nonprofits or a lot of schools engaged in robotics at that time. And that's where I had the impetus to continue to create more teams throughout the East Valley. So it started with the First Lego League. Once I took a group of 8 Latino children to competition, and we came out with the Rookie All-Star Award, which means that we did pretty well. That was the impetus and the driving force that allowed me to create more teams. So every year I had created 2, 3 teams, and it just continued. And then I decided to create a community high school team, which was known as the Binary Bots.
Okay.
We took a group of maybe 8 high school students from our program. We put them into this program, and they began to create a mechanical robot. Mind you, our robot wasn't very good.
Okay.
But where we excelled was community service. So there is a award at the competition called the Inspiration Award, and that means what the team had done in the community to inspire others to create more of the STEM programs or to create a desire to go into the STEM field. So we had over 3,000 hours of community service. So that took us to a competition, an international competition.
It's fantastic.
And it was there that I decided this was our focus. This was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be unique. No other nonprofits were doing this at that time. Thank God we had the presence of mind to create these teams. And from there, we created more teams and more teams and more teams. And we just expanded to other communities, and mind you, with no funding.
Right. So, I mean, with limited funding of sorts, and then you do grant writing. And at what point did you start building a team or a board of directors or, for example, grant writers? How did you start bringing those people in? Because obviously, to a certain extent, you were doing a lot. You're the CEO, you're the founder, so it's essentially your baby, and you want to be on top of everything. But there's got to be a point where you grow enough where you cannot be and do all every single time. So how did that happen?
That's a great question and a great story. There was a nonprofit organization called the Social Venture Partners of Arizona. And it's a group of well-to-do individuals, VPs of businesses and presidents. And what they do is they adopt 5 nonprofits every 5 years. They had reached out to me many years ago, but I wasn't willing to work with them at that time because they wanted to change my role. They didn't want to see me in the community. They wanted me to be more of the manager type. They wanted me to be more involved in evaluations and board development and things of that, and strategic planning, but I didn't know those terms. Remember, these programs are created by a community person often, and I didn't have that business sense. So I was a little bit resistant. And after a year of calling me, inviting me for lunches, they convinced me that this was what I needed to do to grow. They adopted me, and within 5 years, they taught me a lot of stuff that I really had to know, from strategic planning to board development to a CPA to you name it. They gave us $25,000 per year to make sure that we become successful. And I really attribute my success to them because they're great people. And even today, we communicate often. So they're called Social Venture Partners of Arizona. They adopted us. They gave me the training. They did the board development. And that's when we began to excel, because a lot of grants or a lot of the corporations want to see those things in place.
Right, that's correct. So up to this point, what do you think has been the most rewarding thing that has developed or evolved from the organization of Si Se Puede?
Well, that's a great question. We are #1 in the STEM arena in the United States and #3 in the world.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations, yes.
Yes, so we're right behind Japan and Russia. And that is basically Herculean when we're talking about a grassroots organization. So to see this grassroots organization and to see just how we had involved and how we've expanded, you know, we're planting seeds of purpose and ambition all over the state of Arizona with young minds. And we just started a new program called Si Se Puede that we're very, very proud of.
Yeah, and that's focused on young ladies, young females, correct?
Young ladies of color at your Title I schools. And that program was kicked off last year, and it continues to grow. So what we're trying to do is to change the face of STEM, to get in more girls of color into the STEM. Because right now, if you look at the high schools, a lot of those high school teams are run by boys.
That is correct.
The girls have the duties of clerical or go get the pizza or clean up afterwards. We're changing how that is viewed now. So what we're doing is giving these girls the skills. We're showing them how to fabricate and code these robots. And we have a strong relationship with the school superintendents to make sure that the coaches and the robotics teams from the high school embrace these young ladies come in. And that's important, because if you don't embrace these young ladies of color, you pretty much lost them that first day. So we're trying to correct how that's done. And for the next 4 years, we're going to follow them and give them more of those workshops from fall and spring.
When did you start the Si Se Puede girl team idea? How did that sprout? Because obviously you've been helping minorities, underrepresented individuals, and you've been doing it for quite a while. How did that Si Se Puede idea of doing all-female teams develop, and how long have you been doing it?
I had the idea about 15 years ago.
Okay.
To create a Si Se Puede. I didn't really have a handle on it and what I wanted to do, but I knew that it was going to be related to STEM. And it's been on my mind for many years. And when we had the opportunity, when we had the right sponsorship, that's when I made a decision to let's go for it now. So last year, we basically shopped that around. And I don't want to mention universities' names, but they balked at it. And so we found a great partner, which is the Phoenix College, and they embraced it. And they've been a great stakeholder. A stakeholder for us is not only are they going to give us space, but they're going to help out with funding. And not only that, but they have been just awesome to us. And because of that relationship, so we are expanding to other community colleges as well. But the idea has been in my mind for the longest time. It was just time. It was just time. So what I'm trying to do now is to make sure that the next CEO is going to have all these STEM programs for the survivability of the nonprofit organization, because we're continuing to grow, and I want to make sure that the next CEO has everything that I didn't have in place.
So now that you mentioned the next CEO, does that mean that you're thinking about stepping down soon? Are you okay, so no, but you're just thinking about, okay, I need to mentor somebody so that whenever I'm ready or whenever that time comes, I want to see the Si Se Puede Foundation continue going forward.
Yes, the CEO and the CEO that I had in my mind to replace me was going to be a woman.
I understand. Yeah. Okay.
Because I truly believe that your men audience might not agree with me, but women make the best leaders.
Mm-hmm. That is true to a certain degree. That is true to a certain degree.
Throughout my career, the women in my life have been awesome leaders. So I knew that I was looking for a woman, because I have, I don't know, how can I say, motherly values.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why this foundation has succeeded is because I've been a mother and father to many of these kids.
Okay.
They depend on me. They depend on me whether or not to pay an electric bill, whether or not to help them with food, with scholarships. And if I had a business person at this time, head of the organization, who has an MBA in business, that might not work at this time, because,
they're more focused on numbers and profit and how, right.
And that's where nonprofits are headed. But we found a young lady, and I think you know her, Mr. Robotics.
Right. Okay.
She has a master's degree in biomedical.
Fantastic.
And she's a mirror of me.
Nice.
And I said, this is the young lady that we want to train, eventually to take my place. In the future, I would like to become a speaker. I would like to write a book, because I truly believe that I have a great story on how to overcome obstacles. I'm speaking to a lot of schools right now, trying to get that practice so that I can go into that arena and basically plant seeds of purpose, in our students' mind, and teach them how to goal set. And that's what my next step is. But I don't plan to leave anytime soon until it's really stable and we continue to expand. And so when I do turn over the reins to this young lady, she's seated right next to me. So,
okay, all right.
She is an awesome young lady, and I want your viewers to one day, maybe you could interview her, but she has a beautiful story.
I will definitely make time for that at another time. I do have another question that's amazing. How have you been surprised that you actually never imagined that Si Se Puede would produce for you something that you never really imagined? That, I mean, just the fact that it's grown so much and that it's an organization that is world known, that's something that's fathomable. But is there anything in particular that you are truly surprised of that you never envisioned or could have imagined back in 1993 when you left your full-time job and took venture into this endeavor?
I never would imagine that I would still be here today doing this type of work. I never imagined that I would have overcome the many obstacles that had laid my way. I would never imagine that we would be #1 robotics program in the United States, #3 in the world. I would never imagine that I would have job satisfaction. I would never imagine that I would have this child, the Si Se Puede Foundation, seeing it mature, and one day it has to leave me, and I'll be okay with that. But I would never have imagined that that I would be in this position today, that the organization would be so well respected, that we would be #1 again in the United States, #3 in the world. That's a tribute to our persistence. That's a tribute to, you know, the greatest gift that someone gave me, or that many people gave me, are my naysayers. Because, and I tell young people to embrace them, because they gave me the motivation to succeed. So every day I thank the Lord for all my naysayers and said that I would never, that I couldn't, that I wouldn't. And I use that as fuel to keep going on and to create this beautiful organization that one day I got to leave, but I'm sure it's going to be in great hands.
Right. So now that you mentioned naysayers, and I agree with that, the people that tell you, hey, no, you're doing something, but it's not going to go far, it's not going to work, et cetera, et cetera. Was there any point, at some point, that you actually felt maybe they're right? Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I'm way in over my head. And how did you deal with that? Was that something that took a long period of time to actually assimilate, or did you just continue focusing on what you were doing one day at a time? How did you manage that?
It was in the late 1990s when I was sleeping in the vacant offices with no windows. And at that time, I would catch the bus to go from community to community. I had to wake at about 4 o'clock in the morning. It was extremely cold. And just woke up that day where I just said I couldn't go on. I couldn't go on. And I just harkened back to the many people said that eventually I would quit, or that I would not be able to do that. And I had lost faith. I truly had lost faith in 1998 that I really wanted to quit. I couldn't go on. I felt all alone. But I look back, and one of the things about me that people don't know is I'm one of the most persistent people in the world. Mm-hmm. I was a stutterer for many years. I was a special needs student, and I was able to overcome the obstacles. And it was a non-Latina teacher that taught me how to set goals. And if it wasn't for her, I would not be here. And she reminded me that you're not going to accomplish all the goals that you set. She would tell me that. Nobody does. But what's important is my journey. Because at the end, it's not the material things that I would acquire that'd be important, but it was my journey, and that would make me the man I am today. But that was the moment in 1998 where I really questioned it. And I went home to my parents and I said, okay, I'm done. My dad was not happy. My mom was not happy with what I was doing. I was the first to get a diploma, go on to college and graduate. And I recall that I used to go home and to tell my parents that we had a Pride Day. And they would say, so what's a Pride Day, Mijo? I said, well, we went up to the community and we picked up trash and we cleaned up our neighborhoods and we cleaned up our walls. And my dad was so upset at me, and we very rarely spoke about that. And my mom, she passed away a few years back, and she passed away in my arms. And I'll never forget, before she passed away, I said, Mom, did I make you happy? She said, yeah, and that was important for me to hear that. But 1998 was, I was at a crossroads. I mean, it was really tough. I didn't have any money. I ate what the community gave me and walked from school district to school district. And I recall the students that I had worked with for many years would continue to call me. You know that I'm a godfather to over close to about 80 kids.
I did not know that. Okay, that's fantastic.
That's the beauty of being a community leader. Mm-hmm. A lot of times the leadership is determined not by whether or not you have a BA, an MBA, or a PhD, is how you're able to react to the community needs. And this is what I tell people. So a few years back, I got a phone call really early in the morning, and I got a call from a parent. And anytime you get a call early in the morning, you know that something bad's happening. Right. And I remember the parent was crying profusely, and I didn't understand it. But she had called me, and she had told me that her son was shot shot that evening by gang violence. And I knew the young man. And so I had to react. And how I reacted was make sure that I consulted, that I went to their home and I consulted with family, and I made sure that they had food and the arrangements were set. So leadership to me is defined by how you're able to pick yourself up and deal with those. Excuse me.
Right. No, that's fine. Yeah, definitely. I understand. And I understand that's a very touching moment, and you recalling it, it's a very, it still probably has an open wound on you. And it's something that is very hard, very hard to see youth fall in that trap and fall in those steps and fall in those situations. But you did mention that good leaders create good leaders. So I'm going to ask you a question. Who do you think that was a great mentor besides your probably the teacher that taught you how to set goals? Do you have any mentors that you can mention or recall? You mentioned Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, and is there anybody else that maybe you can attribute to being a mentor to you and to creating the person you are today, following your path and passion?
I would have to say my father.
Your father.
My father, because my father had a sixth grade education, but he worked very hard to put food on the table and put clothes on our back and made sure that I went on to college, made sure that I got my degree, and he would focus on that. So a lot of times when we talk about mentors and leaders, these kids today go on to sports heroes, but our mentors
Right.
used to be the crossing guard who crossed the children on a daily basis.
Right.
The mother who has 3 jobs and putting food on her table. And I remind students that you need not to look for your heroes. They're just right there in your household. So to me, my dad was my hero. He may not have understood that, but there's not a day that I don't think about him, that I don't dream about him.
What's the biggest lesson? What's the biggest lesson that you learned from your dad?
Just hard work.
Hard work.
He was a hard worker. He was a hard worker. He worked 10, 12, 15 hours a day. He drove trucks. He worked on weekends just to put food on the table.
Okay.
I made sure that I had an education. And I recall, because I wasn't the smartest student in high school. I think I graduated at the very lowest. And he made sure that I enrolled in Phoenix College, and would often tell me that I don't want you to be like me. He enrolled me in college and took some courses. And so I had to start from the ground level and took beginning classes. But
So do you think that, and I'm talking, and where I'm going with this is that, okay, the generation now and the young kids and the students that are not participating in the Si Se Puede organization or programs, sometimes they fall through the cracks. Do you think that that's because the family unit, or do you think that that's the family unit support at home? Is it the system that's kind of failing? Is it sometimes because they have the wrong mentors and the wrong individual crowd that they hang out with? What do you attribute that to?
I think it's a combination of all those factors that you mentioned. I know that in the families that I see, they no longer eat together in the evenings because mom and dad are working 2 or 3 jobs. We have a lot of latchkey kids who go home and there's nobody there. Here's a story. I remember that I was at the Salvation Army and I was helping them out on their picnic, and we were making hot dogs. And this little girl, 12-year-old, that I knew from our robotics program, she came to me and said, Mr. E, that's what they call me in the community. I said, yes, ma'am. And she said to me, can I have some hot dogs? I said, yeah, Mia, you can have some hot dogs. She said, can I have some more hot dogs to feed my family? I said, yes, you can. And so that's very troubling. And but we see that a lot of our community, they live in the shadows. They don't have much. If not for the Si Se Puede program, they wouldn't be a soccer program, they wouldn't be a robotics program, they wouldn't be ESL classes. Nonprofits today are going more business, and because of their board of directors, they're beginning to charge communities. They're paying the CEOs an enormous amount of money, which I can't comprehend, but there's a lot of factors. It's rap music today. A lot of our kids are becoming entrenched in the rap music. So their styles are changing. They're not speaking Spanish. They're not out there at Cinco de Mayos anymore and things of that nature. But I think a lot of it has to do with our families and the fact that we're a mobile community. And because you see that a lot in our schools, because I'm often asked, you know, why is our community constantly on the move? Because of politics, because of the fact that they're mobile, they're constantly looking for ways to support their families. I'm
So
not sure if I answered.
you mentioned underwater robotics, binary robotics, soccer, and the movement of families. Um, you also mentioned the loss of the cultural identity, and I think that's something that's key. How do you, and I'm basing this off of when we say robotics. A lot of kids, underrepresented kids, think that it's just a fantasy thinking about robotics. They think of what they see in the movies, what Hollywood shows them. They don't see themselves as Latinos, as Blacks, as underrepresented individuals being able to perform at that level. How do you change the mindset of those individuals through the Si Se Puede organization?
We work with the children as young as 6-year-olds.
Okay.
And I think that's the key, is that we have a great school district. The Chandler Unified School District is an awesome school district. So they allow us to go into the schools and work with parents. And I think that now we don't have to advertise, because now the kids are coming to us.
It's word of mouth. They get it. Word of mouth. They see their cousin, their older friend, somebody's working and saying, "Hey, you know, I did this. I'm going to this organization, this event, and this is happening." You also brought the Cinco de Mayo celebration, or Latino celebrations, and family unity, not sitting together and speaking to each other during dinner time. Is there anything that you do during the Si Se Puede time that you can kind of say, okay, this is kind of family time, this is what we're doing, we're instilling those core values again into the young minds of those individuals?
Yeah, it's through youth soccer and dance.
Okay, that's
what you're over 600 kids playing soccer right now at no cost to the community.
Okay.
And every Saturday, our parents look forward to that. And a lot of times, this is all that our community has. So we meet every Saturday from 6 o'clock in the morning. These games go on till about 3 p.m.
Okay.
And it is there that you'll see all our families together. They're bringing their ice chests with their soft drinks and hot dogs and sandwiches, and they're having a good time. We got a DJ. So it's the way that we bring in our families, we bring in our stakeholders. We don't have to worry about our parents not involved. Sometimes we laugh and joke and saying our parents are too much involved in the organization, especially with dance, with the baile folclórico. We want to continue that tradition, and our families come. And now we started a folclórico for the parents, and we started.
Oh, that's fantastic! Because some of them, obviously, they did it when they were younger, and they kind of stopped because of whatever reasons, work, financial responsibilities, home, and bringing them back with a non-competitive type of setting with individuals that they know because of their kids and that Si Se Puede organization. That's amazing. That's really cool. Bringing the whole family circle, full circle, so the parents can now say, I'm also part of this organization of Si Se Puede, along with the kids. Right?
So one of the things we also do is that I teach ESL, and I've been teaching ESL for about 18 years. A funny story about that, if you have some time, is that—
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Is that I attend St. Mary's Catholic Church, and the father had asked me about 18 years ago if I could help him out with an ESL class. I said, sure, Father, but how long do you need me? Because I'm really busy. He said, just give me 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks passed, and that was 18 years later, and I'm still doing it.
Fantastic. So it's a long 2 weeks for you, isn't it?
That's important, because that's where we meet our parents. We distribute information regarding what we have in our community. That's still their ties and close relationship. And what I tell my board is that we don't ever want to lose that relationship with the community. The NAACP had an event not too long ago, and they're talking about how they lost contact with the community and how they should be getting back into the community. And back when they were more involved in the community in the late 1960s. But we don't ever want to lose our community. So that's something that I have to continue to do.
That's fantastic. You also created a STEM summit or slash conference. What was the idea behind it? Is it the first time you did it this year, or is it something that you've been doing? I kind of saw a little bit, and also along with that, you invited Freddie, who is a person that the movie Spare Parts, and for the audience, if you haven't seen that movie, Spare Parts is based on a real story and a real person over in Arizona. And I recommend that you watch that movie. It's with George Lopez, but it's a fantastic movie. But you actually had one of the real individuals, Freddie, Mr. Freddie, who's a real engineer that created a robotics program at that high school in Arizona. What was the idea behind that conference? And once again, was it the first time that you did it? And how was that experience for you?
Well, getting back to Freddie, he retired from Carl Hayden High School a couple of years ago. And he came to us, and we had lunch, and he wanted to work with us. And I told Freddie, you had me at hello, welcome. And so now he's the vice president of our STEM programs, and he's responsible for us being #1 in the United States, #3 in the world. So it was a no-brainer to get him to us. The STEM conference was an idea that I wanted to do years and years ago because we work with a lot of Latino engineering students from Arizona State University. They come out like clockwork and help us out and help us out with the children, but I wanted to get more involved with them. So what we did was, for the past year, I've been meeting with all the STEM clubs at Arizona State University, bringing pizzas and sitting down with each team and trying to get them to this this workshop. We wanted to create more mentors to go into our communities to create more Lego teams and the underwater teams. So they bought into it. They bought into it. They came like droves, and they participated in some phenomenal workshops. They actually learned how to create a first Lego League robot, how to program that. They actually learned how to create an underwater. They're ready to go. So my whole idea was to try to think outside the box. How can I get more of these great young people and into our program? And they came in, and they're part of the umbrella of the organization, and we're getting ready to send them out to the communities and to start more first Lego League.
In reality, there's no limits to what you can do with Si Se Puede from your point of view, correct? I mean, you delve into folklorico dance, you delve in soccer, you delve into STEM, underwater robotics, air, UAVs, drones. So you do a lot of stuff. That's fantastic. What do you envision the future of Si Se Puede to be? And you kind of already touched on having a CEO, Kari being the CEO, but what do you envision yourself, let's say 5 and 15 years from now?
That's a very good question. Yale University has asked me to speak, and we're working with a group called Científico Latino.
Right.
They were also part of our workshop. It's a great organization, so we partnered with them. We are planning to partner with them and to take our programs to Connecticut and to Yale. And then our whole thing is to go to Los Angeles and to go to Boulder as well, and to continue to expand our programs, like outside of Arizona and other communities that need us. I know that the federal migrant programs at the Chandler Unified School District has asked us to work with those kids. So they're phenomenal kids, and we want to just continue to grow. So I'm thinking with what the next 5 years will be in Connecticut, of all places, and we'll be in Los Angeles and Boulder, Colorado, and continue to grow.
Fantastic. So once again, you spoke about still having earlier, and this is getting a little bit off topic, but it just came to my mind. You spoke about something that it's funny because a couple years back in 1990 something, the internet was just being born, and AOL came out. And for those of you who still remember, CDs would be shipped or delivered unrequested, and it was a company called AOL, and they would send it over, and you could subscribe per fee and get an email account. And you mentioned that that's something that you still kept and you still have. So your email account, it's at AOL.com. Can you kind of share with us why is that still something that you have, and how does that make a topic of conversation nowadays?
Well, as we continue to grow, we're working with more nonprofits in the business community, and they often laugh every time I send them an email, and they say, "You don't have AOL?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a dinosaur, and it's very hard for me to change." I'm not the technical person, so it's very difficult. I'm comfortable with AOL, but a lot of people laugh about that, and they often tell me it's not very professional. So we're trying to change that, but it's hard for me to change. You know, at this point in my life, I'm pretty much the same.
It is what it is, and
It is what
if
it is.
they just have to accept it because you've lived with it for such a long time, and so many contacts probably have your AOL address that it doesn't serve a purpose for you to change to something else because they'll lose track of you. Or let's say a student from 5 years ago wants to write to you, they can go back and say AOL, to Mr. Esparza, and that'll be something that they remember. So that's fantastic. That's
And that's
awesome.
one of the reasons why I kept that as well.
That's fantastic. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more of non-Si Se Puede questions. This is more about you as a person. You mentioned that you had heroes, Mother Teresa, you had Martin Luther King, and along those lines, I want to ask you, do you believe you have any superpowers? And if you do, what would they be?
Um, Persistence.
Persistence.
If I could call that a superpower,
Yeah, that
um,
is.
it's persistence.
Okay.
Um,
I mean,
I,
obviously, because you've been persistent enough to continue. I mean, you mentioned with us that back in 1998, you woke up in a cold early morning when everything was kind of going downhill for you. You had that doubt, but then something within you, the faith that you had, the morals that your parents instilled in you, kicked in, and you were persistent and you continued forging forward, and you're still going forging forward. And so I think that is true. That is definitely true. um, is there any particular book, movie, or podcast that you believe has made an impact in your life and that you've never actually been asked, or that you wish that more students, young individuals, or for any point of reference to any individual that wants to grow further or get motivated, should watch, listen to, or read?
there's a movie called Letters,
Letters.
Mother Teresa's story.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
very inspiring
Okay.
movie. I must have seen it about 3 or 4 times.
Is it
Um,
so? Do you know the year that the movie came out in?
it came out about maybe about 4 to 5 years ago.
4 to 5 years ago, and
Yeah,
it's called Letters.
it's called Letters, and
Okay.
it's her journey, and
Okay.
it's
It's
her
about
story,
Mother Teresa's journey.
and it basically it touched my life, and so she is one of my heroes, and I saw it last year, and I will see it tonight now that you brought it up, but it
Okay.
was very impactful for me.
Okay. Fantastic. Fantastic. I do have two more questions. What is your definition of success? I mean, you've achieved quite a bit. You've obviously, from 1993 when you left your full-time job, you've grown quite a bit and you're very successful. But what is your definition of success now at this point?
That I made the difference in my community. There's a poem called 100 Years From Now, and if I can quote that, I can tell you what my success is that 100 years from now, nobody will ever remember the type of car I drove in, or the type of home I lived, or how much money I had in the bank. But the world may be just a little bit better because I was important in the life of the child.
Okay.
So I believe that is my success, that I know that I've been important in the lives of these children.
That would also be, a very awesome legacy to live behind, to be remembered by the work that you did, the community service that you did, the lives and the changes that you were able to achieve and uh, instill in other individuals by touching their early career and life. Fantastic. Um, let's say you had let's say you had the opportunity to get in your car, in whatever car you drive, and you could actually go, 85 miles per hour and zoom back in time to when you were at at that point, back in 1993, what would you say to yourself? 3 pieces of advice that you would tell yourself from your point of view now to your younger self back in 1993.
3 pieces that I would say to myself from back.
Yes.
Never give up.
Never give up.
Never let anyone tell you that you're nobody.
Okay.
Learn how to set goals. Understand that you're not going to accomplish all the goals you set. Nobody does. What's important is having them and going after them wholeheartedly. In the end, it's not the material things that you achieve that's important. It's your journey that will define who you are from here on out.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much. That concludes my interview with you. I am so honored, so happy that you have the time to actually talk to me via Zoom, long distance. And I definitely appreciate your candid responses and your openness and everything that you've shared with me and the audience. I've learned quite a bit. Is there any question or any other piece of advice that you think that is very important that the audience should listen and hear about?
Never let anyone tell you that you can't. I think that's important. Right. This is the message that I tell the kids. Use me as an example. I mean, you need to fail in life to be successful. So do that. Fail often.
Thank you, sir. Fail often and fail fast so you can learn from your mistakes. And once again, this has been a wonderful interview for me, Success Innovation. My name is Lázaro Herrera. I want to thank Mr. Alberto Esparza for his time, and for the audience, you guys out there. You make this a valuable effort for me and for the interviewees that I bring on board, and definitely hope that you find this of interest. And if you do, please share with other fellows so that they understand and they can benefit off of it. So with that, once again, Success Innovation, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Mr. Esparza. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye.
Thank you for having listened to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. I hope that you enjoyed listening to the story and anecdotes that Alberto Esparza from the Si Se Puede Foundation shared with me along this episode. If you wish to connect with Alberto Esparza from the Si Se Puede organization, you can look at the notes below and connect with them via LinkedIn. If you found this information in the episode beneficial and useful, please share with somebody else so that they can also benefit from them. Please subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time. Lázaro Herrera from Success Innovation. Bye-bye.